Hey Matt, what's that on the desk behind you?
Hey JD, I reckon this is one of the best Christmas presents ever.
Why, have you had a peek inside?
No, let's have a look. It's an iMac.
Best Christmas present ever! Welcome to the Macdownunder Podcast for all Australian Apple computer enthusiasts and collectors. Welcome to episode 25 of the Macdownunder Podcast. I'm Justin, and thanks to everyone for joining us and for your likes and comments, particularly on our previous episodes. Now, as this is our 25th episode, and we know what happens on the 25th of this month, it's also our Christmas episode. So now that I've said that, I might just take the Santa hat off. And what better way to celebrate it than to look back at Apple's first really colourful Macs, the G3 iMacs. So that's what we're going to do. So happy Christmas. We'll also cover some collecting news, some coming events and recent finds. So to reintroduce my co-host Matthew. Hi Matt, what have you been up to? Happy Christmas. What have you been up to?
Hey JD, yes, happy Christmas to you too. Happy Christmas everybody. Great to be back for another episode. The last week for me, two big things actually. First is I spent a bit of time restoring the museum Macintosh SE30, which for anybody that has come down recently, you'll know that it is the check-in system that is one of the very first experiences you get when you come into the museum, entering your details to check in. So it's been running pretty well, except it was certainly overdue for some preventative maintenance. So I had that up on the bench and happy to report complete success, and it restored the sound after I replaced the caps and gave the board a good clean. So that was I was delighted with the outcome there. So the other big thing for me was that I received a package during the week, which included a whole heap of marketing stuff from the late 90s and the very early noughties. So there's a couple of bits and pieces which were very relevant to our episode today. Not to give too much away, but some little product cards that would have been available for you to pick up if you'd gone into a reseller, which was cool. Even a little badge, which was cool too, and came with a whole heap of posters and some other older materials. But that's something I bought, and we'll have some of those bits and pieces available in the Mac Museum gift shop. So that was a bit of excitement unboxing that. So that's been me, JD. So what about for you?
That's fantastic. I didn't know you could get swap cards for Apple computers, so there's a whole other collecting avenue that we can come back to. Heaven help us. That sounds great. And to get the SE30 up and running, so it's got another 30 or 40 years of life ahead of it then, after all of that work.
That's exactly it, JD. Yes, it's in for the long haul, and I will continue to have it in use. As soon as I got it up and running, I jumped into Shuffleputt Cafe so I could have a game and listen to the music, which had been missing from it and until it was recapped. So yes, it's in good service now.
Fantastic. Yeah, I've spent a fair bit of the week prepping for today's episode, and I won't give too much away, but I've dusted off a couple of my machines and really pleased to get them up and running, and had a great time messing around with them after quite a while that they've been in storage, so that was good. I'm continuing on the keyboard collection, so probably in the new year we'll do that episode. But one of the ones that I had mentioned I don't think I'd ever find, I didn't find it. I actually found its early precursor. And again, I won't give too much away because we'll probably talk about it later. But Apple bought out the keyboard company and actually repackaged all of their products as Apple products. And so that included keypads. So probably given too much away already, but I've got one of those on the way. And I'm still looking for a genuine Apple branded one, but I've got its ancestor on the way.
Wow, very cool. So
that's interesting. We were talking just before the episode. So literally today, just before we started recording, I bought a 22-inch cinema display, the crystal version from the US. with the DVI connectors, which was the first model, and I know you've got one of those in the museum, and when I found out that they existed, it was time to get onto the hunt. So I found one really cheap out of the US, but of course shipping added a fair bit. So that's arrived today, so I've literally unboxed it and it's sitting on the kitchen table waiting for me to do something with, so that's exciting for later. And I was getting ready to go to retro gaming, and again we'll talk about coming events later on, but spoilers, unfortunately the Bendigo retro gaming event this weekend has been cancelled because of the venue being double booked, which is a shame because I'd already booked accommodation and was all ready to go. No. I get to travel through Bendigo and northern parts of Victoria for the weekend without any retro gaming, unfortunately. Okay. So that was my week in summary, but all lots of fun.
Well, great pickup on the display there, JD. So that's good, and I'm interested to hear about these keyboards. So that's got me on the edge of my seat. Well, for next year's episode when we cover that, that'll be great.
Yeah, so I've got two in transit from the US at the moment, and I'm still negotiating for 2 more at the moment as well. So hopefully I'll get those over Christmas, and that'll see us with a really good selection of early Apple keyboards as well as the newer ones. Cool. So on to today's episode. So again, we decided that our Christmas festive season episode should be colourful. And there's no better way than to talk about the iMac G3s. They're legendary for their various colours, and we'll talk about some of that in a moment too. But you may remember we previously talked about the Pippin console, in fact I think 2 episodes ago, and there was a plan for it to have a version 2 which Apple was going to release as the Macintosh network computer, and that was the plan. But of course, Steve returned to Apple in 1997, and it was in fairly dire financial straits. And so Steve cancelled a whole range of projects, including the Pippin, preferring to have just one desktop unit and one portable unit, one laptop unit for both the consumers and professional users. And the iMac that we're talking today ultimately became the consumer item for desktops out of all of that. From some of the research, apparently Steve's original directive was in fact for the desktop computer to be a network computer. It's because it was contemporary at the time. Oracle and various others were talking about networked computers rather than having all the computer power on your desktop. Get it off the internet and from large servers was the idea. So no onboard storage, download everything from the network and ideally from the internet, as I mentioned. So it sounds awfully like iCloud actually. So, I think they were certainly predicting the future. And in fact, some people will know that the Mac Classic, in fact, I think we've talked about this before, at least in the museum, that the Mac Classic can boot off a network if you take its disk drive out. And so you can actually run all the software and the operating system off your Apple network. And in fact, so could the Apple IIgs. And if you had an Apple IIe with the network card, you could boot those off a network server as well. Not the internet, but these days you probably can actually. I'm sure some enthusiasts have probably done that. And I think we might have briefly mentioned the Apple Interactive set-top box. And it was trialled in Europe in the early 90s. And apparently it net booted as well over cable networks. So it's not like network computing was a new thing for Apple. They'd been dipping their toe in that a fair bit. So Steve's other thing, a bit like the original Macintosh, was it had to be low cost. And I think, ultimately, the history we've just gone through might be the reason why the first iMac ultimately came out with the CD-ROM in infrared port. They were a bit of a hangover from the Pippin and certainly the Pippin 2 design, and allowed you to boot your operating system from the CD rather than from a hard drive. And obviously the infrared port, Apple had quite a few infrared devices around. We'll talk about that probably later on as well, for networking, as well as devices and other things. But apparently Steve saw that the Pippin and other network computers weren't doing so well. The Oracle workstations really never took off. I don't think they even made it into commercial production in the end. And so he pivoted the whole company to the iMac, or the future Macintosh, being a fully functioning computer. And he was also keen not to have any proprietary parts. And so that's why we now know that the iMac came out, didn't have any of the Apple serial ports, didn't have the Apple desktop bus, and didn't have SCSI. Not that SCSI was an Apple only thing, but they certainly were one of the major users of it. So apparently the original designs for the iMac motherboard were based on the Chirp design, the common hardware reference platform that goes back to the PowerPC days and the early PowerPC days, and when they tried to get a standard motherboard for both PC compatible and Macintosh. And the reason for that was it was low cost, and we know that from seeing some of the other models that use it, and it also used widely available parts. And so it used the SO-DIMM RAM, and so it was very low cost, and all sorts of things were available for it off the shelf. And rather than using Apple Serial and Apple Desktop Bus, Steve and the team decided that they'd use the brand new Universal Serial Bus USB, which had not yet been codified by the international groups, but Apple went ahead anyway. So, as I think the whole world knows, Johnny Ive, Sir Johnny Ive now, but back then he was the deputy head of design. And what people forget is that he was brand new in the job as the head of Apple design when the iMac was being designed, because his former supervisor left as part of the 90s turmoil. And in fact, if you do a little bit of reading, Johnny thought about leaving too. And it was only really a sit down between he and Steve Jobs that, the like minds connected, and he decided to stay. And, I guess we're pretty glad that he did.
Absolutely.
So he oversaw the design of the case, sketched out the myths. He sketched out the design, and Steve wanted it to be, attractive and interactive and happy and engaging. And so that's how we ended up with the handle, is that Johnny said, well, if it needs to be, interactive and personal and something you take everywhere, you need to be able to carry it. And we know there's some pretty big things like the Apple All-in-One G3 that preceded the iMac was enormous, and no handles at all. And the use of translucent plastics was another way of breaking the mold, as we know, from sort of beige and platinum plastics. But also engaging and appealing to users was the idea. And even that wasn't new for Apple, because we know the eMate, we've talked about the eMate before, had the green translucent plastic. The PowerMac 8600 and 9600 series have got that little bit of green on the handle that opens the side panel. The LaserWriter 8500, we'll probably have that on a future episode. It's got lots of translucent plastic in it. The dark blue studio display, I know is a favourite of yours, was out in the mid-90s, and it's got the dark blue translucent plastic. And the G3 all-in-one Molar Mac that I mentioned, what people don't realise is the top of it is actually moulded translucent plastic. So even the iMac's precursor actually had some translucent plastic in it, just not to the same degree as we ultimately saw in the iMac. So again, doing some of the research, the internal code name was Columbus, or sometimes that was shortened to C1. And the working title for the commercial release was in fact Macman, which is, I think, a little bit historic. And I think just recently there's been some products available that talk about Macman and what could have been. But Steve really wanted to include the idea that this Macintosh was going to be internet capable. And so their marketing company put forward a whole range of suggestions, including iMac, which is what we got. And interestingly, whilst all of the myths and legends and stories around say that the I was for internet, in fact, Steve himself gave us a whole lot of other reasons for I. In the original keynote. So internet, individual, instruct, inform, inspire. And that sort of reminds me, remember the bicycle of the mind idea that came out with the original Macintosh? So that was one of Steve's hobbies. Well, it really came to pass with the iMac. So we move on to the first generation. And here's a picture of mine, which is one of the ones I got out to play with during the week. And I had a ball playing with this. As you can see, there's a screenshot of my the Macdownunder website there, and I've got one of the Mac Museum website as well. Yeah, had a great time remembering OS 9.2.2 and what the iMac could do.
I think that's an important reference there, JD, to our opening comment about being the best Christmas present ever, is that if you had received one of these, just because it was so different to anything that Apple had done previously and anything that was out there, with the new keyboard, the new mouse, we'll talk about the specs and whatnot a little bit, but just the design, it is great to get your hands on it and check it out.
It is, and particularly now because they're getting on a little bit in terms of history, and they're just such a wonderful machine. So easy to use because it's really only the cable in for the keyboard, the cable in for power, and away you go. Which was the idea, was to keep it really, really simple, and it was really refreshing actually to get it on the desk and plug it in, and fortunately in my case get it up and running. So the colour inspiration. So Bondi Blue is a bit weird because for Australians like us, it sort of resonates a fair bit because Bondi Beach in New South Wales, and a whole heap of the stories suggested that's exactly what it was named after, apparently. So the legends go that Steve had just returned from a trip to Australia at the time of deciding on the colours and names. And so Bondi Beach was apparently a familiar term for Steve. There's also a suggestion that two of the design team that were from New Zealand were surfers and knew Bondi Beach as well. So there's a few different legends coming up to where the Bondi Blue name came from. And the actual colour, again, another legend, apparently the colour was a whole lot of beach glass samples were brought in by the Apple design team. So it may have even come from Bondi Beach, who knows? But the bluey green colour that you can see in the picture that we now know as Bondi Blue was basically a sample piece of glass that someone had found somewhere, brought into the design team, and the whole team and Steve Jobs basically said, that's it, that's the colour we're going to use.
How fitting that we've now got liquid glass making its appearance in iOS 26 and the like. So there we are.
Yeah. So at the launch, again, reminiscent of the original Mac launch, I didn't take a screenshot of this, but the hello again, remembering that the original Macintosh was introduced with hello. So the iMac was hello again. And I think because of the shape and the design of the iMac and the concept of being beautiful, engaging, the ad campaign included the phrase very heavily, chic, not geek. And so it was okay to own a computer.
That's good.
The Bondi Blue ended up in two variations. Now mine's actually, I worked out, I had to go through the specs, but mine's a Rev B that has the upgraded graphics card. But there was a Rev A and a Rev B, and there was also a slight difference in the memory configurations of the two. So on paper, they're identical, but apparently now in the aftermarket area, you can put more RAM into a Rev B because of the slight difference in circuitry. So did you want to take us through the specs, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely, JD. So, as you mentioned, the Rev A and the Rev B, mostly similar aside from a few little things, but we launched with a G3 processor. I think that was, remarkable, noting that it was essentially the processor in Apple's professional line of computers as well at the time, so predating the G4. But we had a 233 megahertz G3 processor, 32 meg of RAM, I think very importantly to note is there was a 56K modem internally as well, which is obviously really important to be able to get on to the internet. It's got Ethernet on board as well, so if you were joining a network, then you could easily connect in to get network and internet access that way as well. So I think 6 gig hard drive, keyboard and mouse as well in the box, which was a radical change from what we had with the Apple design keyboard and the Apple desktop bus mouse 2 as well. So those were in the box.
So we got our first taste of USB. And in watching the keynote again recently in preparation for today, both Johnny Ive and Steve were absolutely enamoured with the Puck mouse. They thought it was brilliant. And of course, it's possibly the worst mouse they've ever made. But at the time, they thought it was magnificent.
Yes, yep. I think it's just getting it out into the wild and people reporting of the ergonomics not being great for long-term use, but we learnt that over time, of course. But, as you mentioned, JD, as well, CD-ROM, 24-speed CD-ROM, and the infrared port, notable on the front, and the 2 audio output jacks for, headphone access. So I think it was a really, important feature for schools so that you could gather around and 2 people could plug their headsets in as well.
Yeah, you mentioned the infrared ports. I couldn't help myself. I had to take some actual screenshots using my camera because I couldn't figure out how to get video out. In fact, you can't get video out of the Bondi Blues easily. So here's some fairly unique dialog boxes in System 9.2.2 that actually show that you can use the infrared port for your internet protocol. And potentially, whilst the specs suggest that you can't run IR talk, which is Apple Talk over IR, you can still run Apple Talk over IP using your infrared port. Still need to test that. If anyone knows, please let us know down in the comments to confirm. But I thought it was worth mentioning this because Wi-Fi wasn't available yet in the late 90s. And so you could do your internet networking over infrared. And we know that the Newton, because we spoke about this previously in an episode, the Newton 2000 series and the eMates had infrared ports with the IRDA protocol for networking. That their idea was you put your Newtons together and you could share information. And this got followed up with the PowerBook 2400, the PowerBook 3400, the PowerBook G3s, all of them, and the G4 PowerBook Titaniums all had this IRDA capability so that you could share files in a meeting or swap contact cards with each other and so forth. And so the iMac came out with that so that you could do networking in meetings in your classroom, I guess. I've not really heard of an infrared server. If they exist, again, please let us know down in the comments. But I'm not aware of any technology that came out that allowed you to do that in a big network, but you could certainly share information from your laptop back to your iMac if you wanted to.
JD, they were so close. If they'd just integrated a service called AirDrop, that could have been a predecessor to AirDrop. So,
well, I mean, effectively it was. That's exactly what you did if you wanted to move a file from your laptop to your Newton to your iMac. It's exactly how you did it.
That's it. Yeah. So finally, JD, I think notably the whole unit bundled together and all in one design, which included a 15-inch CRT display. So it's it did the job. You could do up to 1024 by 768, and it looked very nice, and it was everything in the box, like harking back to the original Macintosh. Everything was there. It was a great bundle and could get you set up very quickly, as we mentioned.
So then, in January 1999, the famous 5 colours, and I'm using that term carefully because we'll get into how they came about and what people call them now. But 5 colours were released. And Matt, I know you've got them all in the Mac Museum. So did you want to give us a show?
Let's have a look. So JD, here we go. We've got the 5 colours here on display at the museum. Strawberry, grape, tangerine, lime, and blueberry here.
And the old Bondi Blue to round them out.
That's it, Bondi Blue there, which allows us to get a bit of a comparison of blueberry to Bondi Blue. It is very common for people to call one the other. I've found, particularly in listings, but yeah, there's the 5 flavours or the 5 colours or the fruits on display here at the museum.
Fantastic. That looks really good. Cool. Well, thanks for showing us those, Matt. So essentially, the 5 colours were an extension of the Rev B iMac with a speed bump. Mind you, we did lose the infrared port with the 5 colours, and we did lose a mezzanine slot that we didn't mention earlier that the original Bondi Blue had for internal expansion. However, I can't find any references to how the colours were determined. So we've got to assume the Apple design team, Johnny and Steve, collectively came up with them. There is a fairly well-known story about a yellow iMac that was prototyped, and allegedly Steve decided that we wouldn't have a yellow one because it reminded him of the colour of urine. But we could have had a 6th one, which might have been lemon, but who knows? It never happened.
Which would have tied very nicely in with the 6 colours of the Apple logo as well, which is, of course, phased out, nearly by this stage, as well as the new identity with the solid Apple colours were in there. But yeah.
So perhaps that, in fact, was the inspiration for these colours, because you're quite right. It matches the logo pretty well, with the exception that we're missing yellow.
Yellow, yeah.
So I guess for us and our podcast, where we really focus on collecting, I watched the keynote for the launch of the 5 colours, and it was pretty clear and funny that Steve was asked, which colours should you have? And Steve said, you should collect them all. A bit like Pokemon, really.
Here we are, JD, yeah.
Here we are, and in the museum you have, in fact, collected them all. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because with the discussion around the Bondi Blue and Steve returning, he just wanted one computer for the consumer desktop, and suddenly we've got 5 variations. Now, I guess the computer itself is the same under the hood, so to speak, but there were 5 options now available for you in terms of colour.
So we've got essentially generation 1 here, JD, that we're looking at. Originally Bondi, and then with the 5 flavours, 5 colours. We haven't talked about what to actually call them yet, but the specifications, we had a speed bump to 266 megahertz and then a speed bump to 333 megahertz available in the 5 flavours.
All pretty quickly too. These were all released within 12 months really from the launch of the original Bondi Blue. So it was a pretty rapid transition. And yes, well, I think you mentioned the colour names when you did the walkthrough, and of course they're all fruit names. So famously now we refer to them as the 5 flavours or the 5 fruit flavours. Some people refer to them around being candy colours, probably more in America than in Australia, admittedly. But the actual keynote, it was just the 5 colours. So it's only the legacy that's introduced these extra ways of referring to them. I'm quite happy to talk to them as flavours or fruits. I think that sounds great. Okay, so then in October 1999, the 2nd generation. So cutting ties with the tray loads, the slot load generation were released. And again, I'm pretty sure you've got each of those in the museum as well, Matt.
We do, yes, down here. So I'll take us on a quick tour of the slot loading colours that were available. All right, JD. So here we have the slot loading generation, which featured the 5 flavours that we were familiar with an upgrade, a few upgrades, but the 5 flavors. The colors remain the same with the addition of graphite, which had joined the lineup.
Well, thanks, Matt. That was great. So technically, the only iMac out of all of this was the blueberry iMac, because the 5 flavors got launched under the slot load series as the iMac G3 DV for digital video. And then the graphite that you showed us there was added to the family as the DV-SE. So we know that SE is generally special edition. We've covered all of these acronyms off in a previous episode. So it can get a bit confusing when you're collecting about which blueberry you've got. And as we'll find out, graphite got used a few times as well as the 5 flavors. So here in the slide, we've got the original Generation 1, which are all tray loaders. And then at the bottom of the slide there, we've got Generation 2, which we've just ran through. And I think Steve must have been really happy. And in fact, I know he was looking at the keynote address, because he always wanted a slot load CD from the very beginning. When he was shown the original Bondi Mac when it was in production, he said, "What's this tray? I didn't want a tray, I wanted a slot load." So he must have been really happy about that. And what else? There was a few things. It removed the fan, more importantly. And that was the other thing, that Steve hated fans, famously hated fans. And boy, don't we know it, because the Apple III was fanless and suffered from overheating. The original Lisa was fanless. The Lisa 2 ultimately got a fan to cool down the hard drive internally. And the Mac 128K, the original Mac, was fanless as well. So this was one of Steve's big things. So he must have been so happy when this series of iMacs were launched.
So I think, like you said, JD, just having a look at the specifications, notably, a blueberry came in 2 options there. So the iMac or the iMac DV. So the quick way to tell which one you've got is check and see if it's got a FireWire port. The 5 flavors, including the blueberry of the iMac DV, now integrated FireWire, which was a very important milestone for Apple with the integration of FireWire to allow for video editing on your desk. And it's that base level iMac G3 at the 350 megahertz, which just omitted the FireWire port.
And a few other things that came with the DV models came with DVD, which probably makes sense. And again, Steve was very happy that you could play movies, particularly Pixar movies that he was chairman of, on your new iMac DV. It also included external video, so there's a VGA port on the bottom of the Mac, and so if you've got one of these and you didn't realise, flip it over and unscrew the port and you'll find a VGA adapter there. And apparently in the keynote they mentioned that Apple was selling a different cover so that you could have the VGA permanently exposed, so for classrooms in particular. And I guess the other thing, we lost the infrared port in Generation 1, but we got AirPort under the Generation 2.
Yeah, huge inclusion there as Wi-Fi was becoming a thing, and that was massive.
And of course, they introduced graphite for the special edition DV iMac G3. Gee, that's a handful of acronyms there. And this was one more thing on top of a whole lot of one more things in his keynote. And whilst, again, there's not a lot of evidence around how they selected graphite, it's generally considered that Apple realised that corporate America and corporates around the world perhaps weren't so enamoured with bright colours and wanted something a bit more toned down, and that the graphite looked a bit more demure and executive-like. The fun thing I found online in doing some of the research is some of the ads for the graphite iMac of the day likened it to a luxury car with tinted windows and luxury leather seats. uh, which was just fascinating.
That's very interesting.
And the graphite slot load was the last iMac to come with its color-coded keyboard and mouse.
I think that's a very important detail there, JD, is that we still had color matched keyboard and mice with this first version of Generation 2, first series in the second generation, the last to have that, until we saw it again on the modern M1 iMacs.
Yes. And again, go and watch our mouse episode, because there are slight variations in the coloured mice of this era too. So the first generation coloured iMacs came with a mouse without a groove over the mouse click, which people found hard to find. And so the 333 version of the coloured iMacs came out with a mouse with a groove over the mouse click button, so that you could identify where it was. So again, if you're a collector, there's a whole range of things around this series of iMacs to look out for. So already in terms of collecting, so we've now got 7 different colours to choose from, and a whole lot more models if you're in that collecting mode. So we'll get back to it later, but how do you choose which one to collect? There's a question to talk about perhaps as we keep going. So again, going back to Steve's original idea of we just need one desktop for the consumer, we've now got 7 desktops for the consumer just in this one release. So then we came to summer 2000 and Apple launched a whole range of new colours, and then within 6 months in early 2001 they introduced more colours. Well, I'll call them colours. You'll see what I mean when we have a look. And then in summer 2001, we got a changed lineup again, back to a more traditional set of colours. But that's a whole lot of releases in a really short period of time. Now, I know you've got all of these in the museum, so let's take a look.
Let's check them out. Okay, JD, so summer 2000, we still had graphite in the lineup, but we were introduced to indigo, which was this darker shade of blue, and we were also joined by snow, a white enclosure, sage, and ruby, a beautiful dark red. So that was our summer 2000 lineup: graphite, indigo, snow, sage, and ruby.
They look great.
And then, thank you. Yes, they the sage and the ruby, I think in particular, look really nice with the natural light that comes in here. And then early 2001, like you mentioned, introduced us to Flower Power and Blue Dalmatian. So not necessarily just colours, but patterns we had here as well. So, and those were the last 2 colour variations that were introduced, because then later on for the last generation, we reverted back to the graphite, indigo, and snow as the available options in the last series of the second generation iMac.
Okay, so here's the table for all of those things that we've just covered off so beautifully in the back of the museum. And I've got to say, in my mind, indigo is the new blueberry, because the base models, as you can see, we'll run through them in a minute, were all indigo, where blueberry was the base model for the previous colours. And then we've got the weird Blue Dalmatian and Flower Power, which apparently there's lots of information out there saying that it was an 18-month delay before they could release these 2 colours because they had to work out how to get them on, and they were embedded in the plastics. But what we know is they're not embedded in the plastic at all. They were sprayed on the inside of the plastic, and unfortunately, tip for later, they wipe off really easily, apparently. I haven't tested mine, I don't intend to, but those that have tried cleaning them have found that the pattern comes off really easily. So I don't know what they spent their 18 months doing. So indigo, interesting. We know a little bit more about indigo than some of the others in terms of the choice, because internationally, indigo was recognised at the time in summer 2000 as the most fashionable colour worldwide. So no surprises we've got an indigo. Ruby and sage, less clear, and collectively these are sometimes known as the gem colours. Although I've got to say I've never heard of that before, but in some of the research I've done, that's what these are called. Did you want to run through some of the specs with us? And the naming, oh my goodness.
Naming. So we've still got iMac as the base model, as you said, JD, with the Indigo now replacing Blueberry as the entry point. But we've then got iMac DV, iMac DV Plus, and then iMac DV SE, speaking of the summer 2000 release. So, and as you said, JD, the graphite and now joined by the snow were the two more premium specs that we had available in the DV SE. So that was our summer 2000 range. Processors continued to see some improvements there. Graphics cards changed. I won't go through all of those line by line, but some improvements there as we tracked along. When we hit early 2001, we again had the iMac, the Indigo version of the iMac as the entry level. And then thereafter, the mid-range was also just known as the iMac, with the iMac SE reserved for the graphite once again, still retaining the SE label there. We had the Flower Power and Blue Dalmatian available in the mid spec and the SE spec there too. So
I noticed I watched the keynote when the Blue Dalmatian and Flower Power were released. It was actually in Macworld Tokyo, and there wasn't a lot of applause for those colours or designs.
Not well received by the Japanese crowd there. Gosh, oh dear. Finally, summer 2001, which was our last release of the second generation of iMacs. We saw, again, mentioning that we reverted just to the Indigo as the entry level. Snow was now available as a mid-range, and graphite available at the higher end. So, notably here as well, processor speed bumps continued, and we saw where we topped out at 700 megahertz for the graphite and the Snow iMac SE, which was available now. So that was our most powerful G3 iMac.
Yeah, and a couple of things from my point of view. So all of these came with a Pro keyboard and Apple Pro mouse. So that was the changeover there. And I guess the other interesting thing, we won't run them all through, but the move from CD to DVD to rewritable CDs, you can look at the chart there and find out which ones have got which. And basically the base model came with a CD all the way through and nothing else. But a whole range of different technologies introduced through this whole period of summer 2000 to summer 2001.
I think, just on that point, JD, with the optical drives, like you mentioned, we'd gone from the video editing kind of little, moment there with when Firewire was introduced, and the DVD-ROM was very important. But we then, as time moved on, the introduction of iTunes made it very easy to rip, mix, burn, was the tag, with the tagline at the time. So the CDRW became, I guess, a more popular or a more desirable optical drive. Maybe by this stage, people had said, if we're going to watch a DVD movie, we're going to watch it on our TV or our home entertainment system. But we really want to be able to rip, mix, burn with the use of iTunes and a CD burner.
Okay, so here's the summary chart. So, as you mentioned, iMac started with 233 megahertz, but ended in 700 by the end of all of this. So that's close to triple in 4 years. So that's a huge improvement in the technology just in such a short period of time. But then when you start looking at the collection and which ones do you choose to buy, for your collection? So there's two generations. There's 41 different variations of iMac. So there's 41 different slots on this slide. There's 13 different colors. But if you then add in that the five flavors come in both slot load and tray load, then that gets you to 18 variations, if you like, of case and design variations. So how do you choose which ones to collect? I've sort of gone for the 18. I've gone for one of each colour, and then with the 5 colours, one of each generation. But equally, you could go for the base models. You could go for a Bondi Blue being representative of the beginning, a snow or a graphite representing the top end. That'd be an easy way to split it, just get 2 of them. How do you decide? But there's plenty of them out there. So it's reported that when the G4 iMac was launched, Steve mentioned that 6 million iMacs had been sold at that point. So there's plenty of them out there. And it is, the iMac saved Apple's bacon, basically. They're in financial turmoil before all of this, and were turning billions of dollars profit by the end of it all. And of course, the iMac continued through to January 2002 when the iMac G4 was launched. Although I think the snow continued on for a short period after that as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, JD, it was absolutely the case that the G3 iMac remained available when the G4 iMac came out. So, and I can remember at the time selling these, they were a lot cheaper than what the iMac G4 was. So the number that sort of Steve put on the sales figures when the G4 came out, that would have continued to increase with the summer 2001 models, which, remained available for quite a long time. And then, if my memory serves me correctly here as well, the Indigo remained available for even a little bit longer than the Graphite and the Snow after those were dropped. So just providing cheap options, of course, until we saw the iMac come out.
That's right.
Particularly for schools. So future episode there, but...
Yeah, and I guess it's worth mentioning the Graphite again, because in some of the keynotes, Steve mentioned that graphite was the most popular, the most sought after, highest in demand colour of all of them. So no surprise that they kept it right through to the end of this series.
And JD, I think it is absolutely worth mentioning that when we're looking at this large variety of iMacs that were available, it's worth noting that it is argued that the Sage iMac is the hardest to acquire or come by, is one of the rarest, possibly followed by the Tangerine slot load, or possibly the Lime slot load, and I would say up there as well are the Blue Dalmatian and the Flower Power. So depending on who you talk to, you might get a different response as to what is the hardest to come by, or the list of rarer ones, but I think it is usually agreed that the Sage is the hardest one to find.
Which is funny because, as I've mentioned a few times now, it's actually the Strawberry slot load that I'm missing and having a fair bit of trouble finding. Although, thanks to Nick from Apple's Anonymous, I think I've got a lead. Thank you to Nick. But I've been finding that really hard to find in Australia, although there's plenty of them internationally, but just too expensive to ship.
I think just on your another comment, just on the collecting side of things, JD, is that the span of iMacs I've got here at Mac Museum, this back wall is just over 8 meters long. So if you wanted to collect them, they're CRT machines, which makes them bulky, of course. But getting them all in a line like I have here requires an 8 meter length. I think if you were to collect them up, I often see 2 meter wide shelving is also a popular sort of choice for people displaying them. And just keep in mind that they're not light, sort of 15 to 20 kilos each. Make sure if you are going to put them up on display, you've got adequate shelving to support them all as well.
Absolutely, and probably worth talking through. If you are going out to purchase some of these, you need the space, you need a bit of cash too, as we'll find out later on in the for sale section. But there's a few other things to look at. Check if the monitor is working. Now, you can probably tell me more about this because you've got a bit more experience, but there can be issues with the flyback transformer.
Yeah, look, it's unfortunate to say that the flyback transformer, which is a very important component for powering the CRT, part of the analog electronic circuitry there, these are known to fail. And if you consider some of these machines have, possibly spent their time in classrooms powered on for, 10 hours a day, 5 days a week for 40 weeks of the year. Unfortunately, the flyback transformers are known to fail, and that's the common thing with all CRT monitors, but particularly with the iMacs, it's unfortunate that you can't easily source replacements. Depending, as time goes on, it will get to a point where you can't source them at all, and I would love to actually hope that I can eat my words there, and there is some sort of maybe a Kickstarter or initiative, like we'll talk about in a moment, for another component of the iMac, but they could be reproduced. But yeah, at this stage, as of recording, very, very difficult to find replacement parts. So,
and so I've always been led to believe it's the ticking sound and a flash of the screen when you're operating it that suggests the flyback is affected. And I know Danny, who's a friend of the show, has said it's not necessarily meaning that the flyback is damaged, or sorry, it's being damaged. It may not be failing. It might actually be the capacitors that support the power going to it. But nevertheless, if you get that ticking and flashing of the screen, it's certainly a symptom to be wary of.
That's right, exactly, JD.
So some other things to look for, battery damage on the CPU board, because these things sadly can get battery bombed like everything else, and the usual capacitor issues. If you've got anything that's failing, it's certainly worth having a look at the motherboard for those sorts of things. Now, you've got experience pulling these apart, and so I think you were telling us that the tray loads are pretty solid to take apart and don't tend to crumble too much.
Yeah, that's right, JD. Look, I've had some experience. The tray loads are reasonably easy to get into. There's a plastic panel on the back which might cause a little bit of grief as you're sort of trying to get it off, but the plastics are generally pretty good. The tray load iMac, the logic board, optical drive, hard drive is all contained in one sort of carrier, so you can actually pull that out quite easily to get to those and replace those components. When it comes to the slot load, we've got a little bit more that we need to consider, as there is a very important structural piece of plastic which essentially the CRT is fixed into, and that is degrading. They are turning into dust and will very easily crack and crumble if you're going into a slot loading iMac G3. So be very careful when you're opening and turning these over onto their screen. A lot of the weight gets shifted onto those, and again, it's probably inevitable that all of them are going to crack. But as alluded to before, this is one item that has a replacement part available.
It does. So MacFX over in the United States have got bezels on sale. In fact, they've got a Black Friday sale on. It's still running, I think. They've sold out of their grey version. And their clear version are currently 194 Australian dollars. But I did check, with shipping, that's close to $350 Australian to get one in your hands. So they're available, but they're expensive.
I think it's one of those things, yeah, very expensive. So you either need to accept that it's a risk with your iMac G3 that it will crack. Hopefully you get one you can find one in good shape and just sit it on the desk and not move it around too much. And the last or another item, just to be aware of as well, is on the slot loads, as time has gone on, the optical drive, the rollers that draw in the CD or DVD and also eject it, will become, they slip on the rods that are there, and also the belt in the optical drive that drives those rollers will become stiff and not turn as it should. So it's just another little item, which again is one that is you can almost say it's going to be necessary to repair or replace. I'd probably put it at a moderate difficulty level, I've done a couple recently, but my goodness, very satisfying once you put it all back together and it takes that disk in and out, spits it out as it would have
got it working.
brand new.
So that applies, whilst it's not the subject of today's episode, that applies to the G4 Cube slot load as well, because it uses
Correct.
a similar mechanism. So yeah, well done on the repairs. That can't have been easy. And I think you've told me this yourself. Just be careful. Don't put discs in an unknown machine because you may not get them out without
Yes,
disassembly.
that is correct. Just to finish off on that, is that the slot load iMacs are more accessible for upgrading RAM than the tray loads. There's a panel at the bottom which was part of the improvement to the case design, so you can very carefully flip them onto their screen, and there's an access panel there. But then accessing the logic board or access to the optical drive and the hard drive, you remove a bottom panel on the iMac and then a shield, and you can get to those. Removing the bottom panel can also be one of those hair-raising moments when you're sort of twisting the plastics, and usually you should be okay, but yes, it is at risk that some tabs could snap there as well.
But it's not all doom and gloom. I've got to say, I had my Bondi Blue out, and I'll just quickly show. There's my Blue Dalmatian is the other one that I was using for preparation for this particular show, and both of those have been in storage since I bought them, at least 15 years ago, possibly a little longer, and both fired up first time. Did take a little while. The hard drives weren't all that happy, having not been turned on for 15 years, but they did power up pretty well. So it's not all doom and gloom, but just be careful with these antique computers. That's a lot of iMac G3s. To our audience, so have you got a G3 iMac? Have you got several? Have you collected them all like Matt and I are trying to do? I'm trying to do, a couple to go. Which one's your favourite? I've got to say, having played with the Blue Dalmatian, it's not the fastest, it's the second fastest model, 600, and the Bondi Blue. My favourite, I've got to say, was the Bondi Blue. Maybe it was because it was Mac OS 9.2, maybe it was just that I recognise that it was, the first generation, but I just loved playing with the Bondi Blue, and in fact, I'm looking forward to getting it out with my Newton and some of my laptops and trying that infrared networking. That's the next challenge. But let us know down in the comments. Have you got them? What's your favourite? How do you use them? Which keyboards do you prefer? Do you like the original coloured keyboards that match the computer? That's what I used for my Bondi Blue. Or do you prefer the Apple Pro keyboard like I used for the Blue Dalmatian? Let us know down in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got any suggestions for future episodes, particularly for next year, let us know down in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, so on to this week's news. Not a lot to talk about. A bit of an update on the Apple Network Server ROM upgrades that people have been playing with. So this user, Big Ben, on the 68K Mac Liberation Army, has reported that he's actually successfully transplanted some new ROMs into a PowerMac 7100 ROM. He had to do a little bit of wiring, and he had to flash the ROMs obviously with the appropriate firmware, but he has got his Apple Network Server booting into OS 9 with the upgraded DIMMs. So I'll put the links down in the description. Take a look if you're that way inclined. It's not for the faint of heart. It's a fair bit of work, but a great project, and I'm looking forward to having a play with that when I get some time. The second item came in through the comments from last week's episode. So from one of our viewers who's also a programmer. So John Penner, thank you so much for your comment. And he let us know about his Lisa screensaver for the current M series Mac, and needs to be running Tahoe. So I tried out the screensaver on my M1 MacBook Pro. It's the only thing I've got running Tahoe at the moment. Couple of hurdles to jump over. You needed to install Xcode. You needed to install the command line tools for Xcode. You needed to install Brew, and then you can install the screensaver. But I've gone through all of that. I've done that before on other Macs. I just hadn't done it on my new one yet, and that all worked. And the screensaver's fine. It looks great. Little bit jumpy on my old M1. It is a very first generation one, but I'm sure in the newer models it'll run really smooth and fantastic. You know, the mathematics behind it are just staggering, which is why it needs to be on an M series chip. But it gives you some two options if you're on an M series chip, and really you need to watch them to appreciate them. So thanks for the work, and thanks for giving us a link to your screensaver. Okay, moving on to coming events. Mac Museum, Matt, I see you've got some ideas of dates perhaps coming up.
Yes, I thought I'd better let everyone know that November's gone and January is the next focus for the Mac Museum opening dates. So I'm still to pencil these in. I've got a few bits and pieces going on in January, but the idea is that the doors will be open for people to come in over a few dates, including some during the week dates. It might be that I'm just here doing some repairs on some of the machines. So have the doors open for people to wander in. And as I'd mentioned earlier on in the episode, there'll be some additions in the Mac Museum gift shop and some of these marketing items that I'll have available for sale at very reasonable prices. So that will be January. Stay tuned to the website and socials for Mac Museum for the dates.
Fantastic. Looking forward to it. Just an update on WasFest. So they've finished their series of meetings for 2025. I'll put a link in the description. Check their website for dates for 2026 when they get launched. Also, Technology Markets have got their last dates for 2025 out, Sunday the 14th of December at Keysborough and Sunday the 21st of December at Reservoir. We do believe the Keysborough event on the 14th will be a retro computing collection show as well, but stay tuned to the Technology Markets posts to get more information.
The Adelaide Retro Computing Group have their next meet coming up on the 12th of December. So that's in Unley, and if you're in the Adelaide area, great to get along.
And unfortunately, the Retro Gaming Bendigo Group have had to cancel their December meeting, which was coming up this weekend because the venue was unavailable. I'm really disappointed because I'd actually booked accommodation, or I still have booked accommodation, and had a plan to get up there with a couple of pippins. So I hope I can get up there in the new year. But if you're planning to go, change your plans. Unfortunately, this month's Retro Gaming Bendigo has been cancelled. Okay, up to today's for sale section. So not too surprisingly, I focused on iMacs. So they don't all come in at under $100. A few of them do. But I thought it was worth doing a bit of a whirlwind tour of what's available relatively cheap. So first up, we have this iMac G3 Graphite Edition for $100 in Melbourne. No issues, apparently is working and available in the CBD. Doesn't mention how far, so I'm not sure which series it is, but it's a graphite, so you know, it's got to be good. All right, next up in New South Wales, there's another iMac G3. This one's the DV graphite, so they've told us. Now, it is working, but the seller has told us that it powers on and off and flicks. So that does sound awfully like it's got a flyback transformer issue, possibly analog power board issue. However, if you're willing to give it a try and potentially swap out some components, it looks to be in good shape with that power issue in mind. Okay, next up in New South Wales, we've got a Indigo G3 iMac for $150. Says that it's working. It doesn't come with a keyboard or mouse, but not a bad addition to the collection if you're looking for, I believe that's Indigo.
It is Indigo, and one other thing I guess we failed to mention, JD, is that the power button changed between the models as well. So that previous graphite was an early graphite with the green power button, whereas this one has the white power button, which was of a later version. So it will certainly be an Indigo. Oh, look at this.
So next up in Queensland, we've got a Blue Dalmatian. Now, it is on auction and it will end soon. Currently, no bids, but asking price of $150 starting price, or buy it now of $490. But I reckon if you want a Blue Dalmatian, get in soon whilst it's still on a cheap auction price. So 500 megahertz Blue Dalmatian, $150. No bids at the moment. Go for it, from Queensland. So next up in South Australia, we have another Indigo, 500 megahertz, $250, so a little bit out of my usual price range. But if you want a working Indigo close to the fastest machine, you've got one there available in South Australia for $250.
With the Pro keyboard as well, by the looks.
And last up, from Western Australia, well and truly out of my normal price range at $1,850. But we've got 9 iMacs, so ready-made collection if you're that way inclined. So per unit, it's actually pretty cheap. So whilst there is 10 in the picture, one of them's been sold, which is the grape iMac under the table, but all the other are part of the sale. Apparently 6 of them turn on and presumably are working, and 3 are missing parts. But if you wanted a shell and a ready-to-go collection of shells, here's the way to go. So WA, $1,850 for 9 iMacs. Well, that's the end of episode 25. I think we've been sort of drum roll waiting for the iMac G3 to come up, and today was the day in honour of Christmas and all things red and green and a bit of white. So we've got all of those colours covered. Before we talk about the end of the season, any final thoughts on iMac G3s, Matt?
Oh, look, JD, I think again, it's arguably one of, if not the most iconic Apple computer. Probably even rivals the original Macintosh. Does it rival the Apple II? That's up for debate, but certainly I think for some of our more recent generations, the iMac is generations of people. That is, the iMac G3 is absolutely one of the most iconic Apple products out there. So I love them. It's great, great fun restoring them. It's great to have them all on display here at the museum as well. And just hearing as well that you've potentially got a lead on your strawberry slot load. That's wonderful to hear as well. So no, all in all, a great machine, and I think really great for collectors to get too.
And we've heard down at the museum too, very popular. The idea of colours certainly came through with all of the visitors that I've spoken to at the museum as well.
Yes, that's it.
Well, not only is it the end of this episode, it's also the end of our season this year for Macdownunder. We will be back up in the new year, but more about that in a moment. I've got a lot of people to thank for the first year of our podcast. Firstly, to you, our audience, thanks so much for joining us when you could, and for your comments and support, both online and those people that I've caught up in person at the various shows or at the museum. It means a lot, and it really motivates me and Matt as well to continue putting this together. To the great friends of the podcast and the Mac Museum, too many to mention. I'm going to forget someone if I try, so you know who you are. Thank you so much for all your help and support and ideas for future episodes. To the guests that we've had on this year at short notice and long notice, helped us out. So Nick from Apple's Anonymous, who joined us for our sort of cables and interfaces episode. Simon from Retro Rares, who we've seen quite a few times down at the museum as well, helped us out as the special step-in co-host. And Josh from Josh's Mac Museum up in New South Wales. Again, thanks to Josh, at really short notice stepped in as co-host when Matt was busy. Thank you all for participating, and I'm sure we'll have a lot more guests in next year as well. And also to both of our families, so Matt's family and mine, for putting up with us and allowing us to spend time putting this sort of thing together and spending all the time in preparation and playing with our favourite things in our Apple collecting hobby. And finally, from me to Matt, thanks for all of your support, your patience, time and effort in getting the podcast up and running and coming along each week to help out as the co-host, and all the preparation that you've done as well. I really appreciate it, so thanks so much. and I'm looking forward to continuing with you next year.
Let me give a thanks to you as well for all your time tirelessly editing and the production work that you do to get this up on YouTube each week as well, JD. So it's been great. I've enjoyed being here, and looking forward to getting back next year.
Thanks, I love it. So we'll be back again next year. At this stage, we've penciled in the 7th of January is probably going to be our next episode. So like and subscribe so you don't miss out. Thanks again. We'll see you again soon. Have a great festive season. Happy Christmas to all those that celebrate Christmas, and take care over the new year. See you later.
Thanks, everyone. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Thank you for joining the Macdownunder Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you again soon.